All right, it is recording. My name is Ty Marth. I am the founder of Game Time Agency Sports, where our main objective is to represent college student athletes for NIL purposes. I am a 3L law student at Northern Illinois University, and I intend on working in sports law. And with me, I have Tony Storniolo and Jonathan Thibodeau. Tony, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name's Tony Storniolo. I'm also a 3L at Northern Illinois Law, aspiring sports agent or just sports NIL attorney. Really happy to be on the call. Thanks, man.
Yeah, and I'm Jonathan Thibodeau. Went to school with Ty and Tony here at Northern Illinois. Just graduated this past June and passed the bar exam just a little bit ago, actually. So I'm an attorney now, so pretty awesome. But yeah, I also want to work in sports. Had an opportunity to compete with these guys in some mock NFL contract negotiation competitions at Villanova and Tulane law schools this past semester of law school, and actually got to win one of those competitions. And yeah, just looking forward to having an awesome conversation here tonight.
Humble brag. So, gentlemen, tonight we were texting our group chat, and we all agreed that this is something we have to talk about. Matthew Sluka, as everybody who is going to listen to this probably knows by now, quarterback for University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Gentlemen, this player, for the first, I keep it black and white, for the first time in college sports history, we are pretty much seeing our first ever contract holdout. So this is unprecedented, at least publicly. If it's happened before, I don't think any of us have seen it. So Matthew Sluka, quarterback at University of Nevada, Las Vegas. This team was 3-0 for the first time in 40 years. His stats aren't that impressive. He does have 6 touchdown passes. He's completing under 50% of his passes. They have a pretty much a run dominant offense, so those stats are a little subjective. He does lead the team in rushing, so that is huge. Jonathan, obviously you played college football before. Like, what is your, when you first saw this, what was your opinion right away?
I was just mind blown. I couldn't believe that something like this was happening at the college level. At the end of the day, I played D3 football, so my experiences were a little different than this, but at the end of the day, we're all amateur athletes playing in college, right? Like, we're not professionals. I think it's kind of sad that we've really gotten to this point where, we're so worried about money as college kids. Like, I get it. Like, we're all broke. We want money. We want to, make money and profit off our own NIL. And I get it. And I think that there's a space for athletes to absolutely do that. But at this point, man, just quitting on your team like this, man, it's tough.
So, probably should say more. He essentially, he was promised a certain amount of money. We've pretty much seen, consistently $100,000. Mm-hmm. He claims that he has not received any of that. We've also seen that he's received a $3,000 stipend, and I believe we've also seen he's possibly reached up to maybe $12,000 perhaps. And now he's going to sit out the rest of the season and obviously enter the transfer portal when it opens up. Tony, what was your immediate opinion when you saw this?
I mean, my immediate opinion is that college sports is no longer the way we have been used to it. Obviously, we've known that the past couple of years with NIL, but specifically college football. I mean, I don't want to say the elephant in the room of the pay for play, but it is pretty much become that. I mean, it's bittersweet because on one end, it's like how genius of the agent or whoever kind of sat him down and said, you got 3 games, you guys are 3-0, you're going to be looking good with, all the polls saying that UNLV could take that spot and everything, all the eyes on UNLV right now. And for him to just come out and be like, well, I'm worth more than what it is. That's awesome for players. But on the other end of it, it's really kind of, you can go all the way back to the NCAA, like their inaction is proving right here that it's kind of come to the point where it's chaos. And it's exciting to know what the next step is. But my first reaction is, what is going to happen next? because how do the schools react to this unless redshirt rules are changed and transfer rules are, and it just makes me think like, I don't know what to expect. So
Absolutely. And Tibbs, like we mentioned, you played D3 football. Like, no matter what level of football, like, what do you think the reaction is in the locker room if you're a teammate of his to seeing what he's doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. Like you guys have said, you're 3-0. Like, this is the first time in what you said, 40 years that the school
Yes.
has been 3-0 like this. Like, you have an opportunity right now to, potentially make the college football playoffs. Like, they have that opportunity in front of them.
They're in the graphic.
Right. So they're
everywhere.
right there. And it's tough too, because now we saw one of his teammates do the same thing. One of their starting back, right? Like, he's doing the same thing. So, but a lot of this has to do with narrative, right? Like, the school's kind of pushing this narrative that, hey, like, we have paid him what we are contractually obligated to pay him. Like, we had a contract in writing, we paid him what we owe him, what we agreed to pay him. And then we have this narrative from, the agent and Sluka that, I was promised $100,000 from one of these coaches when I was being recruited. I've made 3,000. Some people say maybe it's 12,000. We're not really sure. But if you look at it from his perspective, like, if that's really true, then why wouldn't you want the money? Like, I can't really blame him if he was promised $100,000. And I kind of get his point. And I think it's really smart to do what he's done. I mean, if this is really the case, he was promised that money. I mean, he's only played in 3 games. He can redshirt. I mean, it's really tough, man. I mean, you got to look at the narrative and kind of look at both perspectives.
Absolutely. And like, I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer. Is he a bad teammate because of this? Maybe in some people's eyes, but is it selfish to think he's a bad teammate? Probably.
And I think
this. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, this. Like, he wasn't at UNLV this entire time. Like, he transferred. Like, he just came in there. So and we don't know all the conversations that happened when he was at, I believe he was at Holy Cross before he transferred to UNLV.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't know, like, what messages or what was being talked about. But point blank, he did get up and move his life to Las Vegas. And I think we'd be very naive to think that $100,000 didn't have anything to do with it. So,
right.
Just talk about that. Go ahead.
Yeah, and then you also kind of see this argument. I've seen tweets about it that maybe his family's talked about, hey, $3,000 has always been paid. This doesn't even cover his living expenses for a month. But I also have a problem with that argument because, I've worked in D1 recruiting, and from my experience, these guys are getting, their tuition paid for. They're getting a stipend every month. He's probably getting over $1,000. I don't know what he's getting. I'm not familiar with UNLV's program, but I'm surprised if these guys are getting $1,000 stipend a month to pay for their room and board. And a lot of these guys are living together, right? So he might have $400, $500, $600 in expenses for rent, but he's getting 3 meals a day at the facility. Like, he doesn't have to pay for food. Like, what is it in his lifestyle that he needs this much money as a college student? You know what I mean? Like, maybe he's trying to live this lifestyle that's, not normal for a college student. Maybe he's not. I don't know. I'm not familiar with the situation, but that's definitely a part of it too.
I think that I just had a point to make. You make a completely good argument, or not argument, just speaking about it as far as the fact that, there's a lot of things that he would be assisted with. UNLV, still a known program and everything, will have those kinds of things. I think what really shocks me the most about this entire thing regarding the money is just the disparity between what is being reported that he was paid and what he's asking for. And if there were representations to the agent, to the player and everything, then how did the number get so far off? Either A, it should have never been accepted in the first place if it was so far off from what they were actually looking for, or there's some sort of, now we see where they're at because of where they're at in the polls and like you said, Ty, the graphic, and they're just like, well, now we know what he's really worth. And what confuses me is, unless there's some sort of buyout language in this contract or something like that, I'm not sure how they can get out of this, as depending on what he tries to do with the contract.
Right. And then The other thing that I think about is, what does this say about the school and the team, right? Like, what does this say about their opinion about the player? Because if it's really, if he, like, we talked about his statistics, right? Like, he's leading the team in rushing, 6 touchdowns, 1 pick, but his completion percentage is much under 50%. It's 43%. Like, is he helping his team enough to where they really believe he's worth that money to continue to win games? And if he's not, then maybe they'll go with the backup and kind of go from here. But if he's really worth that money, they're going to find a way to pay him. Like, you know what I mean? They would find that money somewhere. They're going to get a donor, a booster, somebody to come in and come up with that money somehow, some way.
Absolutely. And we think about, like, is the grass always greener on the other side? So I get it. He was promised $100,000. And like I said, like, if you're promised that, then you should get paid that, especially since he got to move his life. But do you think him entering the portal because of this, will this positively affect him or will it negatively affect him? Tony, you can go first.
I genuinely think this might actually look bad on him. I think that from a perspective of, the timing, the strategic nature of, instead, like we talked about earlier today, we really don't see, like in the past, people hearing red shirt, they'd be like, oh, that's too bad for the player. And now you're just seeing them voluntarily opt out. And I know that we talked a little bit about, like, the locker room, like, there might be a trickle down effect. Players might think, like, all right, well, if he's leaving, why don't I just redshirt, like how Michael Allen did, the running back and everything? And what's that going to say to bringing in a guy like this? And yes, it is his last year, so he would have 1 more year of eligibility. But even then, it's like, it kind of gives this aura of, like, I put my name to something and I contracted with it, and now I'm just like jumping ship. And I get it. Everybody's got to eat. Like, they're looking for the money and everything. But it's like, maybe you could have went to UNLV and tried to discuss this with them and been like, maybe we can do a different deal, another NIL deal, and like see if you could get more collective dollars. And if it's not collective, can you help me get something more? Because obviously I'm worth more than what was put to paper originally. So I guess at the end of the day, we're forgetting that if these collectives could pay and all that, he's still right there. And if they are going to go on a run, why make that decision a redshirt instead of trying to renegotiate or trying to find something local? I mean, you're in Las Vegas. Like, I don't think I'm sorry to the other states I'm about to mention, but it's not like you're in Idaho or Kansas. Like, you're in Vegas. I'm sure you could find a pretty hefty donor around there and get creative in that sense. Otherwise, you're going to get news stories like this, and bringing a guy in that might have done something like that. Maybe it wasn't his decision. Maybe it was the agent's decision. But even then, having a guy attached to you like that might rub people the wrong way.
Tibbs?
Yeah, the transfer portal's tough. Like, it's just tough in general, right? Like, after COVID, we saw, thousands of athletes jump in, and a lot of them never found another home. Like, they just didn't. Like, that was it. That was in their college careers because there's just so many athletes out there. You know what I mean? And it's tough. So, will it negatively affect them? Maybe. I mean, it's just going to depend on the teams, right? Like, if there's a team that really likes them and they need a quarterback, maybe they pick him up. But, I mean, he played at Holy Cross and then 3 games at UNLV. Like, we're not playing at powerhouses. Like, you know what I mean? Like, maybe there's an FCS school out there that would take him, but he's not going to be making $100,000 at an FCS school. And then I think kind of the other thing that this makes me think about is, and not necessarily with this player, but if we continue to see this happen with other athletes, how is this going to affect players' draft stocks? Like if a GM's looking at this, how's he going to think about this? If scouts are looking at this, what are they going to think? So kind of would like to hear what you guys think about this.
You actually just read my mind. That was my next question I was going to ask.
All right.
So I think so. Like, I'm always for the player, always. But
yeah,
Tony and I are going to be attorneys just like you, so our job is to look at both sides of the aisle. So from the player's standpoint, you obviously are going to want to do what's best for the player. Like, NFL stands for not for long. So you want to maximize as many opportunities, as much money as possible for yourself. But obviously, look at it from the team side. It's like you left a 3-0 start for $100,000, and for the first time in 40 years. So, and like that happened at UNLV. So I guarantee you guys will agree with this. Like, this is obviously going to happen at much bigger schools, And to your point, Jonathan, affecting your draft stock, like obviously a guy that is at a big time program like Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama were to do something like this, if I were GM, I would negatively impact it. I wouldn't like, a future guy in my team doing that, because here's the thing. If he's going to do that in college, what makes you think he's not going to do it in the NFL?
Right.
So, Tony, curious where your thoughts are bouncing off of that.
Yeah, so I think that it might be a case-by-case basis, to be honest with you, because I think in this situation with Matt Sluka, that I think that you can look at it from like, if this were to apply to like a guy, let's just say like, heck, if Cam Ward decided to transfer tomorrow, I think that would say more than with this situation, only because of the fact that, let's be real here. Sorry, Matt Sluka, if you see this, I'm not sure if you're going to be getting, maybe you get an undrafted free agent signing or something like that, but I'm not sure if he'll get an NFL draft with being at Holy Cross. So it might be more about the back there. But like, let's say if a guy's going to a school that might pay him more and might have a better program to build him, I guess it just depends, really. But I guess from what you're probably saying, Jonathan, if you see a guy maybe like every year and then maybe 1 year do like a red shirt, which is the way it is set up right now, I do think you can look pretty bad on that, because I think it's, it says a lot, like if you're going for the money and like you came from a really crappy program and you just had a glow up in your performance. But I think it says another thing if it's like, oh, I just don't like the scheme. Oh, I'm not getting enough money 1 year after another. And if I'm a GM, I'm looking like he's going to have a problem with everything every single year. How are we going to grow with this guy? So I do think it just kind of depends. I know that's kind of a political answer. But you think it's case by case.
And I kind of think with Matt, like if you think about it, like he was productive though at Holy Cross, right? Like he didn't turn the ball over a lot. He didn't necessarily wasn't airing it out all the time, but he had 65 career touchdowns and 16 picks over his career. He's been playing college football for a long time now, but I feel like even if you're at Holy Cross, if you're productive, you go to UNLV, if you go make the college football playoffs and win a big game and you're the starting quarterback, like somebody is going to take you. Like maybe it's a camp invite, maybe it's undrafted free agent you sign somewhere, but like maybe it's a 7th round pick, maybe he balls out. Like you never know, but like this it's just got to be it's just got to natively affect it. Like you know what I mean? If he goes somewhere else next year and plays, even if he plays well, like no one's going to forget this. You know what I mean? It's such a big deal. You know what I mean? This is the first time something like this has happened. I don't know. I think it's just tough.
And so there's obviously there's so many things we don't know. Like living in Vegas is obviously not cheap.
No.
So we don't know if maybe he needs more money to live. Like as looking at it on paper, probably not. He's probably fine. But who knows? Like there could maybe supporting family,
True.
So
that's true. I mean, the way I look at it, excuse me. The way I look at it, like if you have a 4-bedroom apartment with 3 other guys on the team, like you're not spending your entire monthly stipend. You know what I mean? Like you're gonna have money left over. You're not paying for food. You get that free, like unless you just want it. You know what I mean? But I just think it's.
I mean, I bring back the point that why not go? One thing that might look good for a guy down the line if he thinks to go pro is being open and honest. Go to your team, or when I say team, I mean collective. Obviously, in this situation, like. Why is it that the default option right now is to transfer? Has nobody tried to go to their collective and be like, hey, like, I don't feel like I'm being fairly valued. Maybe I signed a contract, but as you can see, here are the projections, what we're supposed to go and everything and all that. And who knows, maybe the reason that they're deciding to do this is because these collectives are putting their foot down and saying, we signed you for this deal. We're not going to budge. tough luck, figure it out. And maybe that is why, and we're just not seeing those conversations.
Right. I mean, I would think he would have had to have gone to the collective, right? And with his agent, Antonio Cromartie's
they did just come off a bye.
Okay.
So I think I would be damned if these conversations were not happening all last week.
Right.
And then yesterday he eventually just dropped the bomb and was like, forget you guys. Like, I'm out of here. But like looking at it that way, and there's only so much money that can like go around here because at least as far as we know on paper, like these collective dollars are coming from donors. Yeah. They're not coming from the school, even though I think that's what's going to come to, because eventually they're going to get rid of collectives and then the school can just pay you. But like and it's happening, like Tibbs, Tony, we've all talked about it, like all these college football teams are getting general managers now. Yeah. So looking at all these donors paying money, and obviously the more you win, the more money you're going to get. So like tying this into this kid had to enroll before he could get anything in writing, which we obviously talked about before this. Does there need to be like a cutoff period of when all this money is coming in from donors? That way we can get all these contracts in writing. This is kind of a long question. Hopefully you guys understood what I was saying.
I think I do. I don't think there needs to be a cutoff period for when the money's coming into the collective, but I think there needs to be a cap. And I think it needs to be Power 4 teams like have a certain cap, right? And this is how much you're out to spend every season. And I don't know what that number is, but we need to look at what these teams can really generate in terms of revenue for their collectives. What amount of money every year can they bring in? And then we need to figure out what that cap needs to be. But I don't really think we need to have like a time. If I'm understanding your question right, I don't know if we need to have a time when we just say, hey, like all the money has to be in by this point, and then we stop until next season, something like that. And maybe we can get into it a little bit later, talking about maybe how these deals should be structured, right? And like, I think that there's interesting things I kind of want to talk about, and we don't have to do it yet, but just about how we can structure these deals from the team perspective to potentially not worry about not having enough money at certain times, at certain points, right? Because I think that's something else we're starting to see is these teams are promising all this money, but they don't even necessarily have all the money in the collective, right? It's not just going to football, it's going to other sports too, right? So that's definitely something that needs to be figured out as well.
Tony, you want to chime in on that? Then we talk about
structure. I mean, I'm with, and that's all with what's happening with, the house settlement. If you guys know anything about that right now, with dispersing the revenue and everything. And I think that that's if I'm anybody in that room, an attorney or an agent or somebody that just is knowledgeable about, anything sports money related wise, they just got to talk about some sort of cap and how it's all going to be dispersed. And I do think I agree with you, Jonathan, on the fact that it'll probably be a little bit different per conference. Those Power 4 conferences are they're going to have more money, not only donors, like if you do it that based, but you're also going to have more TV revenue. I mean, the Big Ten has a deal with, I think it's Fox, that is just far beyond like what probably the American conference has. Like they're going to be generating more money for their athletic department and just, commissions and like ticket sales and all that. So you're going to have to put it on there. And that's why I think college football playoff works perfect the way it is, with making sure that conferences have an opportunity that might not be in those. But at the end of the day, like they're going to have to cap it. And it kind of brings back to what we talked about before. You mentioned the Dartmouth thing about unionizing. Who knows? It's them as employees, because it feels like it's just inching further along towards that. But I feel like there's so much that goes into that. And I don't think that problem will just be solved in a day or one loss.
And I got something just to add real quick. Talking about TV revenue. So like the NFL salary cap, that's a huge part of the cap every year is the revenue from television rights. But, you guys know more about this than I do and how the collectives work. But from my understanding, it's mostly just donors, boosters giving money to the collective. Do you think once we start, I know we talked earlier before we started recording about the state of Georgia and that executive order, now the states can start to pay, or the teams can start to pay these players without the collective being really involved in that process. Do you think we're going to start to see that happen and then start to see TV rights become a part of the collective? Maybe they already are. I don't know how that works. You guys know more than me, but is that something you think we might see?
Tony, you can go.
I mean, it's funny you actually mentioned that because I just saw that South Carolina's collective might get their own media network together, which is actually pretty interesting. But as far as, in my personal opinion, I think that if the schools are going to start getting the money to pay the players, I think it needs to be one or the other. I know that's black and white thinking, but I think it needs to be either that the collective is working for the university and dispersing that money, or it's just that the collective is its own entity and the money goes to them and they figure it out. Because if you have both at the same time, it's not going to solve anything, because you're probably just going to have, the bigger schools, everyone's getting the same amount of money, but then the collectives are just going to get their donors together and it's the same problem all over again. So something needs to happen with these collectives to be absorbed or just structured in a way where they have to report to the university.
And I think maybe I was a little unclear about what I was kind of saying, but I guess what I'm kind of saying is either you have the collective or you have the team managing the money, right?
Yeah.
But the way that we get that revenue, right? Is it just donors that are giving this money, or do we have TV rights and revenue coming into that equation too? Is that part of it right now? Is it not? Is it something that we could become part of it? That was kind of my question.
Yeah,
I think looking at it personally, like if for example, I went to University of Iowa undergrad. You can see the Hawkeye in the background. I think it should come from TV revenue, because if we're going to do a salary cap on these Power 4 schools, we might be looking into revenue sharing to make sure that salary cap can stay at that point. And I know that, and this might be selfish, but I don't want my University of Iowa donations being shared with any other school in the Big Ten. I want them going to the University of Iowa. So I think doing it through TV deals is probably the best structure, because Tony, I'm sure you probably feel the same way. Why would you want to donate money if you know it's going to go to Ohio State or something like that? And that's nothing against them, but it's like that money we donated was intended
Yes,
to
it
the
is.
University of Iowa. So,
yes, it is, Ty. It absolutely is. I know you.
Hey, we're player friendly on this. Remember that. Come on.
I do think.
Go ahead.
I do think that I was going to chime in. I do think that it makes sense for the TV revenues, especially, to be related to the money going to the players, only because it kind of fits the theme of the name, image, and likeness, because, it is them. It's the media of them. Sure, maybe they're wearing the marks and everything, but then you can chime in with a royalty for the school and all that. But I do feel like the product itself is that, and it's the players' majority, because you're watching the players. And so they at least deserve a cut, and the money should come from that. Ticket sales, I guess you could argue maybe that that's the stadium and that's the school putting it on for hosting it. But at the same time, it's like people are coming to see it. So if anything, I'd say even more than the TV revenue. I mean, the games are meant to watch the players play. They're putting on a performance, and they should have a little bit of that as well. And it'll probably sound eerily similar to how the NFL does it, but at the end of the day, the way we're going towards is probably that. So,
and do you guys have, just off the top of your heads, you guys have a reasonable number that would be a good cap number for Power 5 schools?
I'm going to check how much collectives are paying.
I don't know, man. I mean, I couldn't tell you. I feel like it's just, for every school right now, it's just so different, because we have all this, everyone has a different amount of money that they're getting from their donors. So I feel like it's just even though these conferences and these schools are similar, it's probably very different across the board. You know what I mean? On what a quarterback at one school is making compared to another. You know what I mean? Even if they're in Power 4 conferences. So I feel like that'd be tough to put a number on. you have to do a lot of math to kind of get there and figure that out.
I mean,
And especially like if you're, bringing in TV revenue, like I would assume schools would not want to have like all of the revenue. Like it's going to be a portion of the revenue that would go to the players, and they're going to want to keep a large portion of that revenue for themselves. So you'd have to figure out what that percentage is going to look like. I know in the NFL, it's something like players 45%, owners 55% for some of their revenue for their TV rights, something similar to that. So maybe it's a structure like that. Maybe not, but yeah, putting a number on it, I feel like it's pretty tough at this point.
And kind of drawing it all back into Matthew Sluka. In these contracts that I think we all agree that in a couple of years from now that you're just gonna be able to get them in writing right away. You're not gonna have to wait, to enroll on campus, stuff like that. Does it need to be like the NFL where you get paid by playing in the game? And it'll be like we had an agreement, like this was for the season, regardless how many games we win or lose, it's going to be this number. I'm curious on your guys' thoughts on that. Tony, you can go.
Yeah. Sorry. I do think that they'll probably end up, if they're doing the revenue sharing, it'll have to be like that as far as those dollars, because it's the games and everything. But the thing is that at that end, then it is pay for play. I mean, we're getting towards that. It's going to be the case. So, that's all I can say about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think kind of taking a page out of the CBA, right? The NFL CBA would be huge. Trying to structure similarly with like paragraph 5s, right? Those get paid. Like let's just say, for instance, with Sluka, right? He's getting $100,000. How many games a season? 12?
At least 12.
12, okay. So let's say they have a 12-game regular season, 12 divided by 100,000. That's what he gets every week. Now, maybe you can get some guarantees in there, right? Like maybe you're getting an injury guarantee, kind of like in the NFL or something like that. But I think it'd be really good for teams and the collective. Like we were talking a little earlier about how, some teams might be running into this issue where they don't have enough money up front to pay all these players, right? So if they can't afford to do that, if they did a structure like this where they're paying the player to play every week, if they don't have all that money up front, that's okay. You know what I mean? They can make up for it throughout the season. And so I don't know. I think that's probably the best way to structure it is to kind of do it similar to NFL contracts, but we'll see.
I think at the end of the day, if you have the revenue sharing set up like how Jonathan said it, then you get, because there's a lot of talk with like these cases and everything in the House settlement of like what is true NIL. And we're not naive. Like we all know that a lot of these collective dollars are not true NIL because they're not meant for brand deals. They're more meant for circumventing the money to the athlete. And there's nothing wrong with that, but the problem is there's nothing that ties the school to it with liability with these contracts. And, like to tie it back to the Matt Soka thing, it's like we talked about how the representation that he's saying was 100,000 might have been an assistant coach. Okay, well, he doesn't work for the collective. So the question is whose words matter? Like just because the assistant coach said it, well, you signed the deal with the collective. So you didn't contract with the school technically because the collective is not through the school. And I do believe that a lot of this revenue sharing and kind of keeping the money that they would make directly through these TV deals or the commission, that would help a lot with that because then they would get the pay and then anything outside of that would actually be because of the fact that, their brand is big and everything. So it would kind of clear up a lot of the confusion.
Do you guys, and we're spitting out some amazing ideas here. How do you guys have a guess on how many years it's going to take till they actually get this all figured out? And maybe they'll never get it figured out, but I think I've got some hope. I think within 5 to 6 years, they'll have something figured out that this is how it's going to be structured. This is how it's going to work. Or do you guys think I'm overreaching here?
I think you're pretty optimistic for two reasons. One, because I truly believe that since there's so many state laws in place, I do think that there's going to have to be some sort of federal legislation, because at the end of the day, the settlement that's happening right now in House, they're not going to be able to, it's going to be hard because they're going to have to run a fine line with going against a bunch of states. And until they can once again, this is the NCAA's fault. And I'm not afraid to say that because I think every single person agrees with me that would ever watch this. And
I tell every agent and player I talk to, I say
not a single person except for the people that work there disagree with me. So, and that's the thing. I don't think that we're on the wrong path, because I do think that what happened with this is going to be an eye opener for everyone to realize that shit needs to be changed, because otherwise you're going to have people that look at the rule book and they're going to find this out. People think that agents are just yelling at people, but no, they're looking through rule books to find out the move for their client, and they're going to find things like this. So I think that until people realize that this is bad, because this can hurt, if he is doing this for family and everything, this could hurt him. This could hurt people that are transferring and all that. It has unintended consequences. And it's not just the guys that are going to automatically get NFL contracts and everything. It's going to be guys that are just trying to get money to help their families out. And then there's going to be so many contractual disputes. So I guess I sound like the dark cloud over here. But the thing is I don't think it'll be right away. But I think your number's pretty good, 5 to 6 years maybe. I think that somebody just needs to be like, this is a problem now, and move on it.
Tips?
Yeah, I mean, 5 years is kind of what I thought of too, before you said that. But I think the hardest thing is just going to be getting everybody on the same page. Like, we've got to have almost like a collectively bargained structure, right? Like we talked about that Dartmouth case. Are we going to have athletes be employees, right? Can they unionize? Can we have a collective bargaining agreement between athletes and the universities, right? And how's that going to look like? How are these contracts going to be structured? That takes a lot of time. Maybe 5-10 years. Like, that's a pretty big window. But I think this kind of leads to something else. Tony was kind of getting at it. How important it is today as a college athlete to have an agent. Like, so important. It's so unfortunate that it seems like a lot of these kids, they're reading these contracts, they don't know what they mean. You know what I mean? They don't or they're not getting a contract, right? Like, that's the biggest issue. It's these verbal commitments, right? It's kind of like in this issue with Matt Sluka. He's promised $100,000, but that doesn't seem to be in writing. It seems there is an agreement in writing, but it's not that, right? So, man, that's just so important nowadays.
That's a really good point, Jonathan, and I appreciate you going me up over there without saying it. But
GTA Sport, there you go.
Tony and I both agree that these college athletes should have agents. Even if it's, whether you're making $1 million, you're making $100,000, you're making $1,000. Like, have somebody help you, whether it's with the collective or hell, it's just out there to get sponsorship deals, one or the other. But this was a good transition. Do you guys think how the NFL does it, the NFLPA, you got to be certified? Do you think that it'll transition to that where NIL agents will also have to be certified?
So I actually had this conversation with you guys a couple weekends ago when I was up there. That it's getting bad, man. Like, there are people out there that are offering legal services, financial planning, and they have zero qualifications or experience to be doing that. There absolutely should be some type of exam that you need to take. You should be qualified. Everybody should be vetted. You know what I mean? Like, there should be a process you have to go through. Because right now, like, we saw this with Trevon Dexter on the Bears now, right? Like, he was playing at University of Florida. He signed an agreement for an agent to represent him for an NIL contract, and that agent in the agreement had that he was going to make a certain percentage of his career earnings even when he goes to the NFL. And that's not enforceable. No way. But, like, he didn't even know that he was signing that. Like, what kind of crap is that? That's terrible. So it needs to be some type of process for that. Absolutely.
Well, and that's what I will say. This like every player I've talked to and that I'm trying to recruit, I tell them, I said, hey, before you look at my contract, I literally have a clause in there that encourages them to consult an attorney to look at this. And to your point, like so many of these athletes, and especially like the ones that are 17 or 18 years old, and obviously the 17 contract could be void because they're minor. But 18, like you're still super young. I didn't know what I was doing at 18. I'm 26, and sometimes I'm like, oh, we're all still learning something. But especially at 18, it's like, what am I doing? Like Tony, what are your thoughts on all that?
I agree. I mean, with Jonathan and you, I mean, I think that, there's been a learning curve just to keep up to date with a lot of this stuff. And for somebody to actually be out there, I mean, one of the biggest things that I remember hearing, because we want to be agents and we want to do this kind of stuff, was everybody would say like, oh, this is the perfect segue to jump into being an NFL agent one day because it's like easy. And I honestly kind of laugh at that now. And I think that might be completely opposite, because I feel like, Jonathan's mentioned the CBA like a ton of times, and, there's a structure, there's a specific, here are the rules and everything. And, obviously there's a test and there's a certification, but there's a rule book. And there is absolutely no rule book for NIL stuff. And it's changing every single year. Collectives popped up. Nobody really knew how they work. I just learned that you could straight up sign deals directly with the collectives recently. And I always thought it was they garnered NIL deals for the athlete. So I do think that people need to have like an actual training course for this to actually get certified, because it's not only beneficial for the people that might want to work in that industry, but it's beneficial for the student athletes. And if that has to be people that have to get certified in-house, that's good too, because if you're worried about like, oh, taking away jobs from the university, well, then hire people that are doing it. And we're seeing that a lot. People are getting hired in-house in NIL, but, we talked about before that some of the bigger schools, even them, are just like looking on Google daily and being like, how does NIL work? And I think that there just needs to be a compilation of all of the things and breaking it down. But the thing is, it's hard to do that right now because there's so many things up in the air. But once they are settled, there does need to be some sort of certification, because you're going to have too many people. It's becoming pro in a sense. You're going to have too many athletes that are getting into college and being like, all right, where's my money? And then once they see somebody or hear somebody say, here's a wad of cash, you just got to sign your life away to me, they're going to be like, well, I got cash. And that, it's not going to happen as much in the NFL because there's a bigger process to it. And there's the NFLPA where they're going to be like, oh, no, you're not going to get away with that. Whereas there's nothing like that. The NCAA isn't doing that because they're fending off lawsuits right now. They're not worried about the athletes. They're worried about them existing anymore. So you got to have that.
Tips, anything to bounce off of that?
No, I'm just kind of thinking about team perspective now, because that's what I do. But, I'm just thinking, man, like there's a lot of ways for people running these, now we have GMs, or we have like almost like a salary cap type of guy in some of these departments at these bigger schools. Like there's a lot of ways to get really creative with how they're structuring these contracts, and like to make them kind of team friendly, right? Like we talked about structuring it so the player gets paid throughout the season every week, but like there's also ways to like add in there like maybe a forfeiture clause, like, hey, if you decide you're gonna redshirt after playing 3 or 4 games, and then you're gonna do kind of what Sluka's done here, back out, like then you have to forfeit all the money we've paid you. Or there's even ways to make it, maybe take some of that money. Like let's say there was he was going to get $100,000, right, Sluka? Maybe there's a way to put $20,000 in an incentive bonus, right? Like, hey, if you make the college football playoff, you get a $20,000 bonus. Like there's ways to really move the money around for these guys.
If you do not skip out the bowl game, you get a $30,000 bonus.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like,
Right. That's see that it's so creative. Like
know what top 5 pick is going to accept that, but
No, but like, there's just so many creative things you can do. Like that's something that would be good for the team, right? Like you get a $30,000 bonus. Well, guess what? That bonus was going to be in your weekly salary divided by the amount of games that you're playing. But now it's a bonus, and you're not going to get it because you don't want to get hurt. You want to go to the league, and what's $30,000? Like if you're going to the league as a first round pick, it's nothing. But I mean, there's ways to get creative. That's all I, think about. So just interesting.
I did we kind of brushed across it a little bit, and I know it's getting late, guys, so we can gladly do this again next week if we want to. Are there any more like legal issues, like college issues, athletic program issues that you guys want to chime in on? Like, first thing I can think of is that if we somehow figure out this salary cap for college football, like what kind of image does this put on like all the other programs at these universities, when clearly it's college football and the men's basketball program that's controlling all the conference realignment? It's what's bringing in all the money that makes essentially the university thrive. Like, what are you guys' thoughts on that affecting other sports programs at these universities?
I do. Oh, go ahead, Jonathan.
We're seeing football, men's basketball, even women's basketball for a little bit. Caitlin Clark and everything kind of going on there, and Angel Reese and all them. But I think those are sports that are bringing in the money, right? So those are the athletes that are going to get paid the most. I think it's interesting. Something I've never really heard anyone talk about is like Title IX. Like, is that ever going to come into play? Like, does that, like, you know what I mean? Like, that's something I've kind of thought about.
I've thought about that so much.
Like, are we going to have to, are we going to have to pay a, women's golfer the same as a men's basketball player? Like, is that going to be something that comes up one of these days? Because
and even the revenue sharing too,
money
does
there.
that go to other sports, or does that just go to football?
Right. Yeah. There's just so much to think about.
Maybe this could take longer than 5 to 6. Maybe we're looking more.
Maybe 10. Yeah.
Like I said, I mean, I think that it is hard because my first instinct when you asked that was, oh, we'll just kind of divide up, based off of what they're making and everything. But then, Title IX is going to get in the way because it doesn't matter. Like, they're going to want the equal payment dispersed and everything. And I think that we're going to get to a realm where people start asking, and they already have started asking the questions of whether college football will start to branch off on its own and, become its own thing. Who knows?
And then, something else I think about, we have kids that aren't getting money at all that are playing football, right? Like, they're not really getting NIL deals. They're not getting money from the collective. They're not really getting any endorsement deals. So then, let's say we go down that road that athletes are employees, and they can unionize, they can collect bargain. Okay, are we going to have minimums? Like, are we going to have a minimum that a player can make every year for every sport? Is it going to be the same across all sports? And then when we're negotiating these deals, are they all going to be 1-year deals? Because they only have a 5-year window to play 4 seasons. So you would think you'd want to do a 1-year deal every time based on performance. And then the other thing is, like, the player is going to leave anytime they want. So if you did a multi-year deal with one of these kids, who's to say they can't leave? Then they forfeit the money that they were going to make the you know what I mean? Like, there's just so much to think about.
This is obviously something that we could go on for absolute hours.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, this could be another episode.
Yeah, and it might be. It's looking to that. Look how easy we can talk about this stuff. But until next time, I would not at all be surprised if we do this again. But obviously, guys, this was an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to obviously talking again soon.
Heck yeah.
Absolutely.
Good talking.
Appreciate it. Yep.
Absolutely. All right, guys.
All right. I'll see you guys.